everyone, and welcome to Conquer Your Local Rental Market. Very tough session to follow, but I think we're going to get a little bit more granular and a little bit more tactical into what dealerships can do specifically to own their local rental market. We've got some great panelists. It was actually a challenge cutting their resumes down to a short introduction for each of them, a lot of incredible accomplishments and a wealth of knowledge among these three. Cuyler Owens is Dealerware's Chief Commercial Officer. He's responsible for the growth of our customer base at the dealership, dealer group, and OEM levels. He also works closely with our customers and partners to define new growth strategies and potential product enhancements.
Thank you. Getting an applause. Look at that.
Ken Stellon is the Executive Vice President and Partner with Frontline Performance Group. He has over 20 years of experience in various sales, training, and performance management roles in the automotive, travel services, and contact center industries, recognized in the automotive industry as a thought leader on dealership-based rental operations and mobility. He's presented many FPG sessions to industry conferences and trade associations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Monte defined himself as a true car guy with over 28 years experience in marketing, sales, service, and mobility with both Ford Motor Company and Gulf States Toyota. He currently leads GST's strategic initiatives focused on mobility as a service as it relates to dealer-based mobility development, including rental and car share operations. Monte, Ken specifically requested that you kick us off with this question, drawing from your wealth of experience and knowledge with the Rent a Toyota program. What are the advantages you or your dealers have experienced from expanding into the retail rental market?
Thanks, Jim. So, a lot's been said today in terms of the dealer's opportunities, and fortunate to be working with Toyota, who, is really leading the dealer retail rental movement, if you will. So, we've got operations that have been in the rental space now for years. We've had a lot of interest in the last couple of years even, as Toyota has pushed forward in trying to get the dealers more into this business. And, it was said earlier, why would we ever hand our customer off to someone else? Coming to the dealership, if you're coming to buy a car, it's a great experience. If you're coming to service it, you probably have some anxiety. Why compound it by telling the customer to go, wait in the service lounge while the rental car company comes and drops off a car, which is likely, not as nice as the one they probably brought in. So, hey, we've got a great opportunity. We have all the key elements to win. We have a facility, we have a trained staff, we've got a pipeline of vehicles. We have a defined market area, and we got a brand. So why not turn that lever on? And especially, every OE has a loaner program, right? That's just part of doing business. Why not turn that from a dead cost into maybe for starters break even, and ultimately making a profit by simply expanding into a leisure rental, insurance replacement, B2B. So. Lots of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And Ken, working with frontline staff to help them improve operations, what is it that you see as the advantages?
Well, building off, obviously, the profit opportunity is there. We've found that if you're running a successful operation and it's 70 to 75% utilization, you will make money. The one piece that I'll say from the human side of it, of the frontline associate, you're giving another dealership-based associate an opportunity to own something, lead something, manage something. And you hear from dealer principals and GMs all the time that their biggest complaint is, I can't find good people, or the engagement of their staff. This is just another opportunity for them to build something on their resume, take home a sense of pride to their family that they actually operate something. And I think that's overlooked by a lot of different dealerships, and we stress that quite a bit at FPG as well.
And Cuyler, we've talked a lot about hesitancy getting into the retail rental market. How do we get dealers beyond that? But also just being aware, what are the red flags? What should you look out for when renting vehicles to the public versus running a service loaner fleet where more dealers may be very comfortable doing that?
Yeah, it's a completely different ballgame, right? Because you don't have the asset, you don't have their vehicle there in the shop, and so you've got to qualify that customer. But also, if you think about this as a business and you're building a business model that you're agreeing on as an organization, you've got to understand that risk is part of that, right? And build it into the plan. So you're going to have some damage, you're going to have some lost vehicles. That's just something you need to plan for, and then you try to mitigate that risk. And that mitigation goes through with qualifications. The staff are critically important. I know, Monte, you talked about the other day having ex-enterprise employees come and run some of those operations, that it was really good because they have that operational knowledge. I spent 5 years there myself, and I can say the foundation of an operational understanding of the things that you need to do is critical, which means you have to have a plan and document that plan and set your employees up for success, and qualifying to make sure that you're not putting the wrong people in a vehicle so that you end up at 8 o'clock at night trying to repossess that car on the wrong side of town. That is not the right way to run a business. So you have to have a plan. You need to take guesswork out of it, and that's a pretty critical part of it. The new technology that's out there, the telemetry capabilities, the ability to potentially add a significant charge at the front of that rental to make sure that you're covered and that's actually a viable transaction. The technology really helps to shorten some of the gaps. I remember with a $100 bill and a valid driver's license when I was at Enterprise, sending somebody out with a car, right? And that's the kind of risk that sometimes when you're trying to jump to that profitability, you're willing to take. I don't think that happens today. 3 years ago when I worked at Enterprise and I was 24, that's when that was happening. But certainly setting your employees up for success using the technology that you have and delivering for that consumer, there's just a huge opportunity to bring in new customers that haven't been to the dealership.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I add one piece about the technology
Absolutely.
side? I was in the field with one of our dealership clients 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they were using actually the telemetry side. They were on Dealerware. And the ownership mindset that rental manager takes with regards to where's the asset, where's it coming back with, it's not just damage recovery, it's fuel, it's the missing mileage, et cetera. They had that sense of pride. You'd swear it's their damn car. Like they gave their personal keys away. So that is one piece. If you're empowering them with that data, I believe they protect the assets even more.
And Monte, you've helped a number of dealerships transition from that service loaner model to a full retail rental suite. What is it that you've seen kind of, what do they need to look out for? What helps them get over that hesitancy?
Well, the technology, as Cuyler mentioned, is key. I mean, we're in a great age for this business right now because we have more visibility to that asset, those cars, than we've ever had before. Car control, better than it's ever been. Risk, which is a big thing that dealers want to mitigate as much as possible. You've taken a lot of risk out of the business now. So the technology is hugely helpful. I'll step back even a little bit further. We in this business talk a lot about the KPIs. What drives the business? Sales, share. Our dealers now are better than ever in the fixed ops side. They know what drives the shop performance in terms of productivity. But you ask them about their rental fleet or their loaner fleet, and they're not quite sure what good looks like. So we have spent a lot of time talking about building rental acumen with our dealers and our general managers and the management teams. What drives the business, right? Utilization, daily dollar average, those types of things. So really, really important. And then the last piece of that is what we refer to as a departmental mindset. Every dealership has a manager's meeting every week, right? Maybe every day, depending on how things are going. Is the rental manager in there? We call them a manager, but do we really treat them like a manager? Is that department treated and held accountable like a department? Does it have its own P&L? Do you assign expenses according to it? And I think, let's face it, dealers are all about return on investment. And when you can demonstrate that this business has a real ROI upside to it, that's how we've gotten our attention with a lot of our dealers that have kind of been on the fence over the years. So.
Then, Cuyler, specific to the technology, drawing on your years of experience, only 3 years ago, but many years at Enterprise, what does the technology help support do to help support those dealers in getting over those hesitations and handling those challenges? What features were built out to make it easier for the end user?
Yeah, so even from the start of Dealerware, understanding the critical KPIs for the business and reporting on those in a regular, easy basis, right? So when you're starting a business model like this, and when you're installing that in the dealership, and Matt talked about the sixth business model that you're after, right, and revenue stream. You've got to understand those metrics. Everyone on your team has to understand those metrics. They need to be looking at those every day. And that dashboard approach to having that metric available and everybody speaking the same language is critical. Even some of the things that Monty was talking about, capturing the profitability within the product and trying to understand and identify what exactly your daily dollar average is, for example. How are you going to be able to deliver on those numbers? That's one piece. The second piece that I would say is understanding more about the fleet itself, understanding the damage that may be happening on that vehicle and capturing that information, understanding the health, the mileage, when to cycle those in and cycle them out. The more you can automate and less you can take out of the hands of the operator to make this easier to say yes, right? So trying to work with operators to figure out the right data and metrics is a critical piece to tell that story without having to count on, somebody that's trying to grab something for the first time and own a piece of the business, right? It's typically not the most senior person in a dealership that's going to be owning this. And so the more you can sort of put in their hands to make sure that reporting is something that shows an immediate ROI, and the easier you can eliminate the problems of damage, lost cars, fleet with telemetry, better off you're going to be.
Can I add one thing to that? In terms of
just a clarification before you do that. He introduced you as a car guy, and you're a motorcycle guy. So I just wanted to fix that. So go ahead.
I manage both, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you go long enough, you
right.
acquire more. But so talk a little bit in terms of ROI. Dealers. Been in the business a while. There's been different business models that have come to dealers. Matt talked a little bit about F&I. F&I has really not been around that long in terms of a revenue stream in the dealerships. We've all painted the picture for dealers in terms of the upside of accessories. But the one thing about the rental business is every dealer has a loaner program. That's what you do. My favorite question to ask a dealer is how much are you spending with Enterprise every month to service your service customers? And almost none of them can answer the question right away. The really good dealers will call you back in a day or so and say, I can't believe it. We're spending $45,000 a month with Enterprise. So that's a dead cost, right? And I had one of our dealers recently tell me, I said, well, kind of like what got you over the hump and eventually let go of your fleet and start to rent them out to generate some money? He's like, well, I got tired of going to my 20 group and being embarrassed having to explain that dead cost in my fixed operations every month. So we set a goal that we wanted to break even in 6 months. And once we did that, we decided we were actually going to turn a profit. They happen to be our most profitable dealer in GST. Last year they made $800,000 in operating profit. That doesn't even count the amount of money they made in the defleeting of those vehicles and selling them to the used car department. So huge upside.
And supporting other manufacturer locations, right?
Surprisingly, and this is, people think it's crazy, but this, one of the sources of business is B2B, and one source of B2B is other dealers. And you would be surprised if this particular dealer services 2 other dealerships that are next to him as overflow. And we've had other dealers go out, ask their local dealers, let them know, hey, listen, we have lots of cars. We'll service your overflow needs if we have them available. And our dealers are surprised to find how many dealers will actually take them up on that. So, and believe it or not, we have dealers that rent cars back to Enterprise when they're out of cars. And guess what? Enterprise hurts of Avis budget. They're out of cars today too. So, again, one of the advantages of being a dealer and being in this business, like Matt and others have alluded to, is that I say guaranteed pipeline of vehicles. Yeah, it is somewhat restrained, but they do have first pick of the litter.
And I'd add to that the used car inventory that comes along with that, right? So if you think about the middleman approach that a lot of dealerships have been running for a long time, the vehicle's acquired, even in some cases directly in a retail situation, run in an off-site location where you have the fixed costs associated with holding that location, the staff associated with it, they're still turning a profit, and then they're selling it back as used cars that are going back to the same place that they came from, right? And so cutting out that middleman approach is a critical piece of a business strategy, I think.
And there is the hard reality of the CSI, the causality. When you send somebody off
100%.
of campus of a dealership, we did a study, it was a few years ago, but with Auto Rental News, and we found that when you leave the dealership campus for a third-party rental company, it adds 22 minutes to the rental experience. And that was across the U.S. I think we polled some people in Canada as well on that. And what does that do to your CSI? And you can't control that. And I think that's one piece when we're sitting with the dealer principal and making the business case why you should really look at this. They struggle with control. Like they worry about risk, they worry about controlling the different quality of the operation, but you can ultimately better control your guest, your customer's experience with the in-house rental operation.
So our friends from J.D. Power have helped us to actually define what that CSI impact is, and it's significant, right? Yep. So 27 points on the service initiation side, and that was data that has been really compelling and rung true over the last couple of years. They just did a refresh on the study that Chris was nice enough to share with us, and it is compelling. That time matters. Yep. Customers want their time back, and that's been a big part of our success story.
So I think once you've made the argument to the end user, to the dealership, and convinced them that they have to move beyond service loaner, the next question I have, and Monty, we'll start with you. What are the best practices for running a retail rental operation?
Well, first thing you got to do is remove the word loaner from the equation, period. Absolutely. Somebody is paying for that car. We call it a rental. It sounds simple, but it's just one of the things we actually start with. The next thing, and this is a big one, this is a big step, hire a dedicated manager. You have to hire a dedicated manager to run this business. Our threshold really is once a dealer gets to about 20 units in operation, they need to hire somebody, put them in charge, hold them accountable, backed by the KPIs. It so happens that ex-rental guys are really great fleet operators, so it is the best practice to go out and talk to those folks locally about bringing them aboard, because it's really difficult to run this business. You have to be very attentive to it if you're also an ASM, if you're also the business development manager, if you're also a cashier in some cases. So a dedicated manager is really, really key. You got to have buy-in at the top. Dealers have got to be bought in, and hopefully they recognize the opportunities, because without the commitment, it's going to struggle, and it's not an easy thing to just turn on and expect to happen. So,
well, I think tying into what you said earlier, treating that person, once you find the right person, you bring them on board, and then treating them like a true independent department within the dealership, bringing them to the manager meetings, treating them just like any other manager at the dealership, making them feel valued, and showing the importance that you're putting behind the retail rental program. Ken, FPG's built a business around improving rental operations, and it can be daunting to go out and hire someone and start a fresh program. What are the quickest and easiest ways to improve that program? What's the low-hanging fruit that the dealership can start with first?
Well, building upon what Monty just said, you have to have a person. Okay, so that's the one thing in management buy-in. One thing that we do at FPG is we provide a blueprint, if you will. We call it the OEM 7, and some, depending on the brand, maybe 8 different practices you have to have in place. GST has very similar program, and they're very much aligned. So having the person, I would say looking at their, working with them to develop a different acumen and that sense of ownership. One of it is like what their rate per day is, and seeing how they progress with that, how aggressive they want to be at pricing their vehicles, knowing what the market, what's going on in the market, what prices they can command. Then giving them flexibility. once you have, let's call it John Doe or Jane Doe, once they're running it, giving them the flexibility and creativity to doing what's right by the dealership, what's right by the customer, and what drives revenue. One real quick one that comes to mind is 90-minute rates or hourly rates, especially if somebody is in for a traditional service appointment, letting the guest, the customer, leave for 90 minutes. It might be $19, it might be $20, but the customer feels like they've recaptured that 90 minutes. I'd say another very granular one in dealerships is just creating awareness that you have a rental operation. And so that sort of gets back to what Monte was saying is management buy-in. The first ambassador of a rental program needs to be that dealer principal. And I think we've all worked with dealer principals. On Monday, they might hate the idea. On Tuesday, they might love it. And they're like, damn it, Monte, why haven't we done this, right? And I think we've all seen that. So a few people that resonates with, but thank you, Lori. Okay, so, but they really have to, the dealer principal has to be the biggest cheerleader of it. And then you have to create awareness. Signage, just simply get signage that rentals are opportunities. I mean, I think GST does a nice job of this, but those are two very granular ones, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I think where the KPIs and the goals of the dealership meet is the right place for that sponsorship. Because if you don't have that sponsorship, you end up in, we've all sort of seen it, right? That there's a shell game that occurs and revenue ends up in different buckets in different places. And man, this rental car fleet is costing me a ton of money. And it's really easy to sort of paint that picture. But if you have that buy-in and you have that need and desire to treat this as an independent business unit and look at the numbers accordingly, that's really important.
Can I say one thing about the numbers with the dealer and GM mindset? By having a consistent numbers presence and they're looking at it as a separate department, all it takes is one incident with the vehicle or one converted car and then the GM is out on the program. But they forget that they had 5,000 successful rentals through the entire damn year. So by having that sort of light post of like, no, we are making money, we are going to take a little risk, it keeps them towing the line because we know they can be, I guess, erratic at times.
Well, I think that goes back into the previous question. I think Cuyler mentioned about the risk associated with the business, that you have to build that in from the get-go and have that mindset going in that there will be things that come up.
Absolutely.
There's a correlation too of assigning value for those new customers coming in, right? Every time you have those new retail customers that aren't traditional dealership customers that haven't come in through the channel of service or sales, but are actually taking part in a mobility program, that's a new customer that has never seen the dealership, probably never interacted with that dealership, and you have a brand conquest opportunity to jump into. You've got to assign value to that. And if you start looking at the amount of spend on marketing, for example, or acquiring new customers, that's an important part of the equation, and it needs to be built in.
I have one final question before we open it up to the room for Q&A. But Monte, we'll start with you. How do you think electric vehicles will play into the retail rental market in the future?
So I use the example of hybrids. There's still hybrids have been around for over 20 years yet. There are lots of people who have never ever experienced one. So our dealers have put hybrids into their rental fleet, and that service customer that needs a car has never driven a hybrid before, has an opportunity to take that vehicle on a test drive, if you will, and most of the time they come back and they're like pleasantly surprised. I don't know how many of you, but if you've driven a recent hybrid, they're great. The hybrid RAV we have today is actually one of the fastest cars 0 to 60 in the Toyota lineup, believe it or not. It's almost embarrassing, but it is there. So they're sporty. The performance is really there now. So getting customers in the seats. And I think the same is going to hold true for customers with electric vehicles. It's a great opportunity to introduce a customer to a car they might not ever take the time to experience. So we're really excited about that. One thing too, it's in my case, Toyota's been really fantastic in really enabling the dealers to build their fleet however they want, and that includes electric. So Our rental fleets will be some of the first folks in the dealership to get an electric vehicle. In our case, now we're operating in the south, in the south, so we don't have any PZEV states. We're going to have a pretty limited allocation, but our dealers can order anything they want. They can spec out their trucks the way they want them. We kind of call it's their used car wholesale pipeline. They can build the cars the way they want, configurations and the colors. So back to electrics, I think it's a great opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Ken, how do you see this changing operationally for the retail rental market, the introduction of all these electric vehicles?
This might be a different take, but I mean, it makes me think of the facility footprint itself. You hear these people say, oh, dealerships are dying. No, there's not going to be any dealerships. No way. They're still building cathedrals out there. I mean, some of it's their ego, like they love having their name on the building. Shit, if I had the money, it'd be huge too, right? But that's one piece to it. If Automotive News just issued their top 150 dealers, and the stat that really hit me is 10 of the top 150 dealers own 22% of the locations in the U.S., which is staggering. And if you see the planogram, the footprints that they're building, they're not cutting away from the service departments. They're not cutting away from the areas you'd put rental operations, because I think they know it's going to be a mobility hub, if you will. They're taking away from where? The showroom, right? Because let's face it, the showroom, that whole experience, I think we've heard it quite a bit, it's in a transition period. So I believe these well-respected organizations that are publicly traded, they know that dealerships are going to be a mobility hub. They're building the footprint for it. So I'm excited to see that. I think there's a lot of different avenues when somebody comes in, whether it's a loaner, whether it's traditional retail, it'll be a great experience for them. So
I would agree. I think the need for a solution to deliver on the previous panel, as they were talking about it, the 1 hour to 1 year sort of continuum of how people want to consume an EV initially, how they want to feel comfortable. Some interesting data coming out of Hertz, actually, that 57% of the rentals that they actually supply with EV doesn't ever require a charge, right? So it's a great way to dip your foot in. And I think the consumer that we're talking about that's going after EV and changing the infrastructure that they need to support that, changing the way that they're really going to own a car, it's got to shift a little bit. And I think this try before you buy potential is critical, and that's going to be a good way for people to feel more and more comfortable and get into that mode. I think when you look at range anxiety, and there was the J.D. Power Summit at NADA had really good data about how much of a percentage of that new EV traffic that's going to be coming in is going to be supported by the infrastructure. I think there's a lot of people that have concerns about that, and they're going to have to do so incrementally with small steps to get there. And I think mobility and being able to support that is going to be the right way to get people to adopt at the level that needs to happen with the commitment that's coming.
Now, I think, to take another negative view, if those vehicles are coming back and it takes substantially longer to charge an electric vehicle than it does to just gas up the car and hand it to another consumer, I imagine operations have to change to account for that. Do y'all have any thoughts on what the rental manager, how the operator needs to change?
Well, I mean, I'll speak back to the technology piece now more than ever. To have visibility to that vehicle even before it returns, and understanding its state of charge, for example, is really, really important. And figuring out, okay, when that car returns today, am I going to be able to turn it and get it back out this afternoon, or am I going to have to hold it longer because it's maybe it's fully depleted? So, what's exciting about the technology today is our rental managers have got platforms, such as Dealerware, for example, with embedded telematics. So the first managers in the store that are working with this to run their operations, and it's really kind of elevated the position. It makes everybody else in the building a little curious, and some maybe a little envious, but they've got a lot of technology at their fingertips. We now just launched, Toyota launched collision detection and service warning now. So now, the rental manager gets notified when a vehicle's been in an accident. They get notified when that vehicle, a service warning light has come on, and they can be proactive in reaching out to the customer to make sure that that they're taken care of. So it's really amazing, and this has just happened in the past in our world in the past 12 months. So we're still learning, and I'm just excited to see what else is coming down the road. So
there's so much more data than we've had before to inform the right operational strategies, right? So you know things much sooner than you would have in the past. Telemetry specifically is opening the ability to really build that into visibility for the operator. And if you give somebody data-informed decisions to make instead of, hey, what do you think, new employee at the dealership, what do you think you should do here? You're setting them up for failure, right? And so you use data to put that in front of them, and that is the right approach to make sure that you hit all the efficiency buckets.
Absolutely.
Excellent. We have a few minutes left for questions. There's a microphone up here in the middle if anyone has any questions for our panelists. Or everyone's really excited
Jefferson
to get to
not
lunch.
hit me up with the question. Jefferson's out on this question.
Our business model is really based on the fact of complementary loaner vehicles, right? So before COVID, we had started the process of looking at a rental program. So where do you see the balance or come across the issue of balancing complementary loaners versus rental using the same mobility fleet, where you don't start having abuse of, well, I can make money off of this vehicle, but we're really supposed to be doing this complementary for our service customers. So, and a dealer being a dealer and in the business to make money, they see that as an opportunity to make money versus complementary to a customer. So how do you see the balance of that being an issue?
Can I ask a question to your question? I'm not trying to define. What brands are you working with?
BMW?
BMW?
Yeah,
Okay.
BMW Mini.
Okay. I would say one thing is creating awareness for your customer that you have different segments in your fleet. So, for example, if you have an SUV line or you have anything out of the typical sedan line, that they can also experience that. Creating the awareness that if most of your loaner and courtesy vehicles are going out Monday and Wednesdays, or it seems like that's a hot time for you guys, that the vehicles are also available, the gap from Thursday to Sunday night drop-off to cover that gap. That's one opportunity. I would also say, like, letting them know that it's available. The other thing that Cox put out a report about how many customers prefer a text throughout the process, and they actually welcome when the appointment or their vehicle's ready, letting them know that they can extend the vehicle if they want to keep it, if it's a different car that's even nicer than their own. So it sort of carries the bridge that, like, hey, I can actually use this for something else.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's some different things that come to mind.
That's actually really a great question, because that's the second thing the dealer asks when you ask them to get into the retail business is, I've had a legacy complimentary program for 20 years. There's no way I can turn these customers off. What I would tell you is exactly what he just said in terms of starting to educate our customers on setting the expectation, and you'll be surprised. Now, understand you guys are a premium brand, but in our world, the experience we've had in the last 6 months has come up a lot, is customers surprisingly take it. I mean, if it's done in the right manner, if customers are informed, I think our dealers are surprised at just how little pushback they're getting from customers that said, I don't get a free loaner. What it does too is it puts the impetus on the advisor or whoever's handing out the complimentary loaners. Let's face it, if they're not tied to, how long those cars are out or anything like that, they hand them out until they're gone, right? They're like, at the end of the day, I just want to be out of cars. And so as part of making this transition, there should be something in place that has got, a tiered approach to how they divvy out cars, right? So the days of, a customer getting one just because they're in for a rotation, for 30 minutes, those days are gone. So, but
certainly, I would absolutely agree with that. The length of loan equation and figuring out ways to drive that down, get the repair completed, take care of that customer, and do more with fewer vehicles so that you can free up that utilization for other things. The other thing I would really focus on, and we've had a lot of discussions recently around this, which is, are you putting the right value on that vehicle as a loaner and building the business case for the dealer around how much that repair is making them, right? Are they looking at the full picture? Have you gone through the analysis? And then as a brand, the opportunity to put the right incentives in place. How much do you tie with CSI? How much are you tying with taking care of that customer, a day's wait for repair? There's a lot of ways that I think you can move that needle back and forth to get into the right spot. But again, it's data, looking at the numbers and outlining, I think, implicitly for that dealer, why is that a good decision or why is that not a good decision, and building that business case for them. And those are conversations that we have every day.
Good. So my second question is, now that I'm up here, you touched on Tesla, right? And the fact that Tesla is actually opposite of what you're saying with grander showrooms and grander service drives. They're more like, we don't even have that. Everything is done service mobile. So another initiative for BMW is more mobile service work, right? Which inevitably leads to less loaner car need and things like that. So do you have a thought on where that goes? Because with more electrification and things like that, customers aren't going to have to come to the service drive to do a lot of work, and they will, with COVID and things like that, appreciate someone coming to them to service their vehicle. And let's be real, if we're looking to win back customers that have deflected to Tesla who have that mentality now, we need to win those customers back with equal mentality. So how does that play into the grander service drives versus?
I'll say this, there's a reason why Matt's slides had RedCap as a partnership. Pickup and delivery is a requirement. There are brands that are making significant promises around that, and there are some consumers that want to come into the dealership, but by and large, we're seeing that shift, right? They don't want to do that. They want that pickup and delivery service. And the ability to drop, back to your first question and kind of tying those together, if you're picking the vehicle up and dropping off that service vehicle, your length of loan is shrinking down significantly. You just have repair time to worry about because you're not asking the customer to do anything else. You're going to shrink that down, and we know that customers are spending more if you're dropping a vehicle off with them, right? So your repair costs are going up, your RO numbers are going up because of that. So I think it's absolutely critical that pickup and delivery be a strategy, and that does allow for some of the giant cathedrals that we were talking about before to really shrink down. And that service experience can be much different than it has been in the past, and that's kind of where consumer preference is going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have time if there's one quick question remaining. Otherwise, we can give our panelists a round of applause and thank them for their time.
Nice job. Thanks, Jim. Good job.